My daughter stopped calling me dad last week. She started calling the mailman dad instead. At first I thought it was a game. Kids do weird things sometimes. My 4-year-old Olive has an active imagination, and she's always making up stories. But when I picked her up from preschool on Monday, and she ran past me to hug the mailman delivering packages to the school office and screamed "Daddy" at the top of her lungs, I knew something was wrong. The mailman looked just as confused as I felt. He awkwardly patted her head and looked at me apologetically. I pulled Olive away and asked her why she called him that. She looked at me like I was stupid. Because he's my daddy. You're just the man who lives in our house. I drove home in silence while she chattered in the back seat. My wife Nina was already home when we got there. I pulled her aside and told her what happened. She laughed it off and said Olive was probably just confused, but I saw something flicker across her face, something that looked a lot like fear. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how Olive had been acting differently around me for weeks, less affectionate, more distant, like she knew something had changed between us, even if I didn't understand why. The next morning the mailman came by with a package. His name was Ronald according to his badge. Average height, brown hair, brown eyes. Nothing remarkable about him at all, except that my daughter pressed her face against the window and waved at him like he was a celebrity. I watched my wife's reaction carefully. She didn't look at the window. She didn't look at me. She stared at her coffee like it contained the secrets of the universe. I decided to do some digging. I found our mailman's route schedule online and figured out that he'd been delivering to our neighborhood for about 5 years. Olive is 4. The math made my stomach turn. I took a day off work and waited by the window. When Ronald's truck pulled up, I went outside to meet him. I introduced myself and made small talk. Then I asked him directly if he knew my wife. His face told me everything before his words did. He stammered and said he'd delivered packages to her a few times, that they'd chatted occasionally, that it was nothing, but his hands were shaking when he handed me the mail. That night, I confronted Nina after Olive went to bed. I told her what I suspected. I asked her point blank if she'd had an affair with the mailman. She denied it at first, said I was being paranoid, said Olive was just a confused child, but I kept pushing. I told her about Ronald's nervous reaction, about the way she avoided looking at him, about the timeline that made too much sense. She broke down at 2 in the morning. She admitted everything. 5 years ago, when we were trying to get pregnant and struggling, she'd had a brief affair with Ronald. It only lasted a few weeks. She ended it when she found out she was pregnant and convinced herself the baby was mine. She never told anyone. She thought the secret would stay buried forever. But children sense things adults try to hide. Olive had seen her mother talking to Ronald through the fence one day last month. She'd heard Nina call him by his first name with a familiarity that didn't match a stranger, and somehow in her 4-year-old mind, she'd connected dots that I had missed entirely. I demanded a paternity test. Nina agreed without argument. The results came back 10 days later. Olive wasn't mine. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the testing facility and cried for an hour. The little girl I'd held in the delivery room. The little girl whose first steps I'd filmed. The little girl who used to fall asleep on my chest every night. She wasn't my biological daughter. I moved out the following week. Not because I stopped loving Olive, but because I couldn't look at Nina without feeling sick. We're working out custody arrangements now. My lawyer says I have rights because I'm listed on the birth certificate and have been her primary caregiver. Ronald wants nothing to do with any of it. He transferred to a different route and I haven't seen him since. Olive still calls me the man who lives in the house even though I don't live there anymore. Her therapist says she's confused and acting out because she senses the tension, that she doesn't really understand what she exposed with her innocent words. I visit her 3 times a week. I bring her stuffed animals and read her stories and pretend my heart isn't breaking every time she pulls away from my hugs. Last week she called me daddy again for the first time in 2 months. She was half asleep and probably didn't realize she said it, but I held on to that word like a lifeline. Biology doesn't make a father. 4 years of love and
Click the link on the homepage to watch the full follow-up for free.